In this video I want to talk about the SAR CM9 Gen2, and the CM9 stands for Combat Master at 9mm, and that's kind of an interesting name because there are some reviewers out there on YouTube that actually kind of touched on that or just made a comment about it. See, here's the thing, with a lot of Turkish pistols you're getting them for a pretty good price. Now, a lot of people account that price for quality, like the Turks are just making cheap guns for us. However, if you actually look into these pistols, they do put a lot of thought. However, I want to talk about, kind of my impressions of how these things happen. The Turks are pretty prideful and they really try to keep up with the market. However, being that their civilians are not allowed to own like pistols or a lot of rifles, they are able to own things like shotguns, but still, because of their history in wars and their police forces being pretty active and stuff like that, they actually have an interesting amount of experience, more than you'd think, with firearms. So a lot of their stuff is they understand that civilians like to kind of benefit from the experience of these companies producing pistols for police and military. And Sarsilmaz is like they're one of the largest as far as providing contracts for their Turkish police, which is basically merged their defense force, and it's all merged into one totalitarian government kind of group, if you will. So basically, with their pistols, the CM9 is one of their most popular sellers here in the U.S., and they're trying to get other pistols. The SAR 9 is out, and that's one of their newest pistols that was designed for the military. However, I don't know the status of those contracts, and I don't know the status of the actual testing, so I'm reluctant to even talk about it. However, it seems like it kind of shows the passion that Sarsilmaz has with delivering quality products. However, we're also going to get into the quality of this pistol later on, but I want to kind of evaluate this on its name and see if it really kind of lives up to the Combat Master and what they might have been thinking. And of course, you can judge it for yourself, but let's first talk about the size of this pistol. Now, the concept behind this pistol is a lot like what you're seeing with the Glock 19X and the Glock 45, where basically you have around a 4-inch barrel and you have a full-size grip. Now, a lot of people are like, well, I don't understand why they would be cut off at the barrel or the slide and not the grip. Well, the grip, you're always going to want a full-size for duty. However, I think the point in the 4-inch barrel is that if you look at it, 9mm is pretty much, save for a few things, they're pretty much optimized for save for a few ammunitions or whatever, it's pretty much optimized the defensive loads or ammunition in general to top out at 4 inches as far as velocity is concerned and pressures. So 3.8 inches, that's not really meeting 4 inches, but it's pretty dang close. Not much difference. So the profile that you have on the slide here is just enough, and it looks smaller, but it's just enough, and you still get that full-size grip. So you do see another split here in the kind of preference as far as the market is concerned, where basically people want to have a long barrel for maximum performance or maximum range and accuracy relative to the ammunition they're shooting, and they want a smaller grip. I think what they're trying to go for there is, of course, accuracy and velocities for certain rounds they're firing, and also they're looking at probably also lower recoil because of the weight of the slide and stuff like that. They can get a little lower recoil. So that's a size concept that the CM9 I think was going for, and this is really based on the EAA K2P, which was the first version of the CM9, but it was almost a direct copy of the EAA, or the Witness, by Tanfoglio. So basically, this is kind of an offshoot, and in the grip here, you're actually seeing that the texture they're using and the pattern. I think what they were doing is they were looking at a lot of manufacturers like Walther, HK, and stuff like that, and they were like, you know what, we like their concept, but we want to make something that's a little bit different. So they probably put a good amount of research. They didn't want to have a bunch of aggressive texture in here. They wanted to kind of smooth it out a bit, but still give a little bit of texture when you're actually gripping the pistol to where it can still hold on. It looks like little fingerprints, and of course you have these finger grooves, and we'll get into, you know, this line right here in a bit, but basically you have these little finger grooves that are really nice. A lot of people do not like finger grooves these days, and I think that's just my personal opinion is that that's just a trend. People, part of the Me Too club, they just find something wrong with finger grooves or whatever, and they use that as an excuse, but it was never an issue until it was brought up. But anyways, next thing I want to talk about is the serrations on the slide. You can see that these are a lot more aggressive than a lot of the standard serrations that you'll see. They're close. The standard serrations would be closer together. These ones are a little wider apart, and they are not pretty sharp, like they're going to take skin off, but they're a good depth, and they actually do give a very good grip, even though you have these little cuts right here that kind of thin it out a little bit. You are actually able to get this slide, manipulate this slide pretty easily, and surprisingly so. But that really changes the game for the CZ design, where people complain about the slide height and having a problem getting a good grip on it. Now, the ambidextrous safeties on here are pretty nice, and they are extended. A lot of people cry about, extended safeties or whatever, but I'll tell you, with a CZ design, you really do need extended safeties, so left-hand friendly and stuff like that. But with the way it is, the location, as you can see here, I'm barely touching right here, and I wish that was something Sarsilmaz would actually, fix. And this is not exactly the most positive safety, but it is pretty easy to actuate when you're putting it on or taking it off. But you can see here, I barely get a grip on it, and it goes to the contour of my thumb. I do not appreciate that, but I wish it was just back a little bit. Right here, you see they tapered it. I think this was tapered a little too early, but that's just my opinion. But I actually have been practicing with it, and I actually do prefer the cocked and locked version. This is like, other than in 1911, this is kind of new for me, and it's kind of interesting to find that out. So anyways, people are going to complain about that. So like the other controls here, the slide release, this is actually a slide release, not so much a slide stop. The aggressive cut in the slide where this locks open the slide, it's actually pretty deep, pretty durable, and there's very few times you're actually going to get this thing to go home on its own. It's got pretty good aggressive texturing, and it's very easy to manipulate if you wish. However, I'm still of the school of thought that a nice solid rack is a lot easier, because sometimes you might get a bad magazine, or not a bad magazine, but a bad spring in the magazine from wearing it down, and you might just have the slide going forward or something like that when you're doing a reload, and you're going to have to rack it anyways. But that's on technique and stuff like that. So this is a separate video. So anyways, that kind of goes back to the serrations being very good and very easy to manipulate. And I think that's something that sets this pistol apart from others, like say the Sphinx, where they have their new duty, which is basically the same profile as this. And I think it has some qualities that kind of beat out others, or keeps it in the game, if you will. The magazine release is reversible, and a lot of people have complained, a lot of reviewers have complained that this is flush, right? Well, I think the reason behind that is their experience with police and military, where they don't want this inadvertently being pushed, and it does have a good spring weight on the magazine release, but it can be worn in if you wish, and it can be basically smoothed out and stuff like that. It is a little bit gritty at first. It's kind of a rough gun in general, but it wears in very nicely, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I do not really have a problem with this, and actually, you're not able to get to this with your middle finger like some guns. You got a nice undercut here which a lot of people like, but it's not that easy to get to, but it doesn't require me to change my grip all that much in order to actuate it. So I do appreciate this magazine release. So anyways, let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. Sights. Now these sights are adjustable in the rear, and the front sight is actually a pretty good size. So as you can see here, the front sight is actually filled up pretty nicely, and the contrast here when you're actually aiming in, it's pretty big. It's kind of hard to see on camera, so I apologize for that, but it fills it in pretty nicely. Most of the air on both sides is actually going to be a white dot, so it fills it in. Now that's where I think there's a departure in experience and stuff, where if you're looking at sights for CZs, they're typically pretty tight. I'm not really a fan of them being really tight if it's going to be a combat pistol, because typically if you need a pistol, it has just become your primary weapon because your rifle is down or you don't have time to do a reload and get it back in the fight, and so you need something quick. And the biggest thing is getting your sights acquired on target nice and quickly. And even with this smaller lower, sight radius, less distance in the sight radius, I don't think that, this would suffer too much from a little bit of an expansion. As you can see here, the rear sight tapers right here. I don't think that they should have tapered this. I think they should have left this open. Now, granted, the dots are, on these sides where the taper actually exists. However, I think they could have been pushed off to the side, and they could have taken away this taper a little bit, and it would have been fine. But squeeze it over to this little area right here, which actually I think protects the paint pretty darn well. But that's just my opinion. And also on the adjustable sights, I'm not really a fan of having them on a combat pistol, and so I think that's kind of a fail with the Turks is when they designed this gun is they don't have all the knowledge that we American shooters have. We're a gun country, and so we're very innovative in what we have, and we have so much variety on what people want: durability, reliability, accuracy, shootability, stuff like that, low recoil, you name it. So we have a lot of variety and experience in developing these pistols pistols, rifles, whatever, that really suit people's needs. So anyways, with the sights, I'm okay with them, but I just wish they would have a fixed sight model or whatever. I don't like having to dial these things in and then have the screw walk out a little bit or change itself under recoil, which has happened to me, and I had to put Loctite on it, and now I'm going to have to re-zero it to kind of find out where it is and test it to make sure that it's not going to walk out more. So anyways, next thing I want to talk about is the trigger in general. Now on single action, if you have not been working with this pistol too much, and you've only got like 200 rounds and you haven't been dry firing this thing, it's going to be pretty hellacious. Now on my other videos on the reviews, you see that there's a little moving part here where it lifts up and out of the way of the hammer. So you see that little piece moving there? That's a pretty thick piece, and that's going to give it a good amount of durability, and it's going to give a consistent trigger pull for a very long time. However, it does kind of, kick, I guess you could say, where you get a little bit of kick there, and yeah, you can see those little stutters on the way. It's not really as smooth, but here's the thing about a combat pistol where I was like really forgiving this thing. When you're pulling a trigger on a combat pistol, you're pulling the damn trigger. You're not taking your time. And I know a lot of people are like, well, if I have to zero it, I need a nice trigger in order to do it. That's BS. Use the pistol the way you're going to be using it and zero it accordingly. And work on it to tighten your groups if that's your problem. So, next thing is that I use this in the double action. And a lot of people gauge the double action being fully forward. That is the only time you should actually be doing that is if you have a failure to fire. And yeah, the trigger pull on it sucks, as far as weight, and it doesn't really feel that great. However, the reason why it's actually pretty tight is there's a very tight spring here. It's not like the other CC75s where you have a hammer spring down here, but it's basically a compact spring, and if you drop a little bit of lubrication right here, right on the hammer strut, then you should be good to go. So that'll loosen up the trigger pull. However, if you're going to be using this pistol, I recommend half cock for using it in double action. It shortens the length and it shortens the pull, and it also, you're going to get the weight of about 10 pounds. It's going to be a little bit gritty, but again, it goes down to using this pistol the way it is designed to be used as a combat pistol, and you're just going to pull right through it and you're not even going to notice it. In fact, it's going to surprise you a good amount. You're not going to really feel that much as far as grit is concerned. So anyways, that kind of breaks down into other qualities. So anyways, next thing I want to talk about is, I know I'm being very thorough and this is going to be a long video, but if you don't like it, I apologize. I'll try to keep them, as short as possible, but I need this information out there, is at least my opinion on these things. So the barrel. This is a stainless steel barrel, all the metal, like as far as the slide and the barrel, they're forged. So this is a cold hammer forged barrel, and I'm not so sure if it is actually hammer forged, but it is stainless steel, and they leave a really nice polish. I'm gonna have to eject my snap cap for this, but there we go. So it's a very nice polish, and you can kind of see the wear on there from the couple thousand rounds I put through this pistol, and it's worked very well. The springs on this thing are pretty good, and it's still pretty tight. Kind of off the subject of the barrel, but it's standard rifling, and it's a very nice high polish, and I think this actually helps with corrosion resistance, and it just looks really nice. Now, some people don't like reflective finishes. Dude, when your pistol's holstered, it shouldn't be a problem, and you're not, unless you're using it as an entry pistol, I don't think it's really that big of a deal. But anyways, it's not really going to do anything. If the people are seeing you, it's not really going to help you too much. Just having something that doesn't reflect so much. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, last thing really, is the quality of this pistol overall. And I think I'll go ahead and break down this pistol in order to show you what I'm talking about and point some things out. Okay, first thing I want to talk about is the slide on the CM9 Gen 2. So this slide, pretty good machining on the outside, and I think that's mostly due to the finish on it. It kind of looks like a paint, almost like a cheap Cerakote. Well, not really a cheap Cerakote, probably like the updated Cerakote where it actually wears instead of chips away or flakes away. So it's actually a pretty nice finish, and if you see in here, there's really not that much wear in here. It's done pretty darn well. I think that has to do with how smooth the barrel is, and there's really not many machining marks. And especially back here, incredibly smooth, very good quality on the slide. However, here is the point where they kind of failed to be smooth all the way through. Machining marks. Is that a big deal? Absolutely not. I mean, if you can cut, production costs, then that's great. Get those pistols out, but looks aren't everything. If it doesn't screw with it functionally, then I don't think it's a problem. And you notice that the wear halts right at this wall and per to the design. So I think this is just fine. They're machining it, it's less wear on the tools, and that saves you costs, and it doesn't sacrifice quality. This is kind of the same subject with this barrel. You see that this barrel is highly polished on the sides, the top. However, when you get down here, it's not so well finished. And is that a problem? No, it's still pretty smooth, but they're not going to go into ridiculous detail for it, especially like right here. However, this is nicely, polished for the most part. And the feed ramp is polished, and there's really not much sacrifice on quality and for this pistol as far as manufacturing in the barrel, and it looks really nice. However, the biggest problem that I had with this, the biggest gripe I had as far as looks, was the crown. The crown is abysmal. It's not smooth. It is, you can see the round machining marks all the way around. The little lines, I don't know if you're going to be able to pick that up, but I had a video I did earlier where it showed that, and it's probably coming in okay, but you can see, standard rifling. It's not really that big of a deal, but I do like the rifling. And anyways, there's that. And then of course these parts are pretty beefy, and these are actually pretty tight in there. When you're putting on the frame, it can be pretty tight depending on your pistol. Mine is pretty tight. And these components right here, standard old school CZ components, and I believe a lot of these springs and stuff like that are interchangeable. And like the trigger return spring, interchangeable with other CZ components. This little spring here, probably interchangeable as well, not really quite sure. But that's a good thing about these pistols, is they typically have long-lasting trigger components. And like recoil springs, dual recoil spring system, something that you'll see, I believe, on some CZs like the PO1 or something like that. But it just goes in here. You have a nice double recoil spring system that is actually pretty tight, and it's still holding its weight pretty well as far as its compression weight. So I do like that they make these pistols to a pretty good quality. So anyways, let me go ahead and show you the slide release. Very smooth finish, very well made. They didn't sacrifice on quality and smooth machining where it actually mattered, and there's bearing surfaces. However, in the trigger, it's mostly just kind of bearing surfaces being smooth, and I think it's mostly an issue with the finish. It is what it is. And I don't really see that much of a problem with it. Of course, you can see these parts rubbing right here on the trigger bar. But when you release the hammer and stuff, there's really not much of any movement. I think most of it's in the actual sear and some of the springs where it's putting a lot of resistance on it, tight fitting, stuff like that. So that's something you might be dealing with. But right there, it kind of skips along. But anyways, let me go ahead and get this pistol back together, and we'll go and finish up. Overall, I've been pretty happy with the SAR CM9. It uses CZ magazines. It works pretty well with them. It's been very reliable. I actually like the looks of the stainless steel barrel. It actually works pretty well with this pistol. I'm not a fan of a couple things like the adjustable rear sight, the lack of sight options, and stuff like that, but there are things I can live with and I can make do with. The trigger, it bothered me at first until I was actually shooting it the way it was intended to be used. The grip I wasn't a fan of until I was just using the pistol, saw that it wasn't a big deal. So water off a duck's back, right? The accessory rail here, this is the first time I've used the accessory rail, and I'm going to be testing to see if the recoil is really any different, putting like a light on there to see if the added weight kind of helps the recoil. But here's the thing, the recoil is nice and low on this pistol given the short barrel, so it's actually pretty impressive how fast the gun goes right back on target. And I actually made a video talking about trigger control where I use this pistol, so you can kind of see how well it goes back on target with a halfway competent grip. So anyways, I appreciate you all watching. I would appreciate any comments, and give this video a like, give my channel a chance to grow, and subscribe. But thanks a lot for watching. You guys have a good one.